There we go. We're good. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome in to this video. And if you've been with me ever since last January, or this past January, I should say, you'll know that I primarily stick to Crossroads League basketball on the men's and women's side, doing daily game recaps. Then, of course, if you've been with me also this just a few months ago, back in March, with all the national tournament previews and predictions and going over the RPI and the ARC rankings and talking about which teams will be in, which teams might be on the bubble, which teams might be among the first four out, as well as recapping the first and second round games of a national tournament, looking over my updated bracket and showing that after each individual round. I'm still going to do all of those things for this upcoming season, which, hard to believe, conference play for Crossroads League basketball is about 2.5 months away now. So all those things I'm still going to do. However, I wanted to record this video and talk about volleyball because, and again, I typically don't record videos talking about really any other Crossroads League sports other than basketball. Now, I did do some softball and baseball, especially once we got toward the league tournament back in the spring, in the late spring months, April and May. But really excluding that and basketball, which is my primary sport that I talk about, I typically don't talk about any other sports. So I wanted to switch it up and talk about volleyball and not do any specific recaps of any Crossroads League volleyball games, but just talk about some teams that have really shocked a lot of people this year, and in terms of the rankings and the way the preseason rankings were, and talking about just how all of that has leveled out, so to speak, as we have started conference play. And I want to talk about one team in particular. Of course, in the updated NAIA Top 25 poll that came out yesterday, you had Indiana Wesleyan fall from number 1 to number 7, which I honestly thought Iowa was going to fall a little bit below that, especially without their best player, Eva Geroldsma. But Indiana Wesleyan, they played an extremely tough non-conference schedule, and 5 out of their 6 non-conference opponents were all ranked in the top 15. So, I mean, that obviously puts things into perspective, just how tough it was. And of course, they struggled in some of those games. They lost in, I think it was 5 sets. They lost to number 2, and I think it was number 2 in the country. I could tell you just. Hang on. Well, I'll get to that here in a few minutes. But I want to talk about a couple of teams that have really shocked a lot of people, and that is the Bethel University Lady Pilots. And this is a team that nobody talked about in preseason, and they have just really stepped up. And of course, they're under, I believe, second or third year. I believe it's third year now, if I'm not mistaken, head coach Erica Dredgetz, who played for Bethel back from 2004 rather, played from 2004 to 2008, and she has led her Lady Pilots to a record now of 9-5, 1-0 in Crossroads League play. So obviously, you look at the overall rankings and they're not ranked whatsoever, but I beg to differ. This is a team that I easily would, if it were, of course, obviously, the polls are based off of, a panel of coaches from around the country voting. Now, if it was personally me, I would definitely have Bethel ranked inside the top 15, because they are a top 15 team, no question about it, especially when you look at their roster led by some of their key players. Of course, I'm using my iPad to look at that, but talking about their key players from last night, Liberty Pearson, 10 kills, Sophia Beeson, 8 kills, and you also had Brianna Bosket with 10 kills, and you had Ainsley Tacky with 11 kills last night. Now, Tacky is Bethel's all-time best player. She's 6'1". Now, this is a Bethel team that the bulk of their roster are roughly about 5'9", 5'10", or higher. So obviously they have the size advantage against some of these other teams. And they faced off against number 15 Mount Vernon last night. Bethel defeats Mount Vernon 3-1. And the biggest thing for Mount Vernon last night was they had 22 total errors. Bethel only had 15, so obviously that's a big difference there. But looking at the box score set percentage, Mount Vernon won 25-17 in the first set. Mount Vernon hit 147, Bethel hit .053, but then the last three sets were a complete flip-flop reversal in favor of the Pilots. The Pilots 25-17 in the second set, and they also, when they hit 387 in the second set, Mount Vernon hit 310. Then in the third set, Bethel hit 273, Mount Vernon hit just 189, and then in the fourth and final deciding set, Bethel hit a blistering 345, Mount Vernon just 237. So obviously there is your difference there. Now some bright spots for Mount Vernon last night. Libby, of course, really in terms of Mount Vernon's best players, you have Libby Evanshine, Evelyn Brown. Now Brown is a freshman from Canal Winchester, and she's played outstanding for head coach Kendra Mosher. Faith Maloney stepped up big last night for the Cougars, 14 kills as well. But obviously the attack, or all the errors, not just attack errors, but service errors, hurt Mount Vernon. So that is a look at Bethel, and obviously this is a team that I know probably was projected around that number 6 spot. And you look at the standings from last year, and let me pull that up real quick. And last year, Bethel was a team that went 21-18, 8-10 in conference play, and they were the 5 seed last year, 1 game ahead of Huntington. And you look at Bethel this year, and they're currently sitting 9-5, 1-0 in conference. They're off to a great start. This is a team that I really, really expect probably to finish around that 4 to 5 spot once again, easily around that 4 or 5 spot. Now, of course, the league is just so competitive this year. I think it's the most competitive that it's ever been. So, but now, for sure, I would have my top 2 teams that I would have definitely finishing 1-2, and actually probably in the order of IWU finishing first, and then Marion second. I would have Spring Arbor Spring Arbor finishing third. Taylor, Bethel fighting for that 4 and 5 spot. Mount Vernon probably down around that 6-7 spot, and of course, and as well as Grace, and then Goshen and St. Francis and Huntington also fighting for the last playoff spot to be in that 8th spot. So again, based on what I've seen so far, that's how I see things playing out. Now, obviously, it might not play out that way. There's still 17 more games of conference, but I'm just saying anybody can beat anybody. This is a super, super competitive conference this year, most competitive it's ever been. And then, of course, speaking of Spring Arbor, they are undefeated, 13-0. And they are ranked 23rd in the country now, and this is their very first time in program history that they are ranked inside the top 25. So a huge congratulations to them and head coach Betsy Martinez, who's in her 10th year, which is just absolutely amazing of how she's able how she's been able to coach her team this year. Now, this is a team last year that went 12-16, 6-12 in conference. They were tied with Taylor for that 7 and 8 spot, but Spring Arbor got the 7 seed because of a tiebreaker over the Trojans. And so this is a Spring Arbor team that, boy, they have really flipped the script this year. And of course, they're led by Kendall Bollenbacher, who has just played absolutely outstanding. She had 17 kills last night, and their upset win over number 16 Marion, which for the Lady Knights, that was the first time in 7 years, dating back to 2018, that they have started 0-1 in conference play, but they're also led by a brand new head coach. So obviously, maybe that played into the factor a little bit, but I watched some of that game last night in the 4th set, and I just noticed Marion just seemed completely off. Now, in non-conference, on the other hand, they started off 8-1, and you look real quick at what they of what they started off in conference, and you look at, a tough loss they had was IU Kokomo, that's ranked in the top 15, or top 20 rather. So that was their only loss in non-conference. But, for Marion, that was their only ranked opponent that they played in non-conference. So obviously you take that with a grain of salt, I guess. And then you look at the Taylor Trojans, 10-3 right now, and they were 6-12 in conference last year. They're ranked 22nd now. They've had a lot of upset wins this year, and part of that was they upset Missouri Baptist, that's now ranked, I believe, up in that number 11 spot, beat them in 5 sets, beat Receiving Votes Indiana Tech 3-0. And then, of course, lost to Eastern Oregon, that's ranked in the top 5, lost to Providence out of Montana, that's ranked in the top 10. So Taylor does have some good losses, but they also have that big monster win as well. So a big, big difference there for the Trojans from that 8th spot that they finished in a year ago under head coach Aaron Luthi. And then you look at Huntington, and again, for Spring Arbor real quick, this is the first time they're ranked in the top 25. They got a really, really good chance at going to the national tournament, probably for the very first time in their school history, at least I would imagine, since this is the very first year that they've been ranked inside the top 25. So that's going to be a huge achievement for them. Pardon me. And they have a really big game coming up at home Saturday against number 7 IWU. And I think Indiana Wesleyan, that could be the game of the week, honestly, at least in my opinion. And then looking at the Huntington Foresters, they've started off 10-1. Now, they're not ranked right now, but under head coach Kelsey Herber, who's in her 7th season, they have just had a phenomenal start to their year. They're undefeated at home, 7-0. They have not had a road game yet this year, but they did sweep Receiving Votes Rio 3-0, and they did have a bad loss to Campbellsville, losing in 5 sets 3-2, and then they picked up a home win, and then they swept Receiving Votes Indiana Tech last weekend and beat St. Francis last night 3-1. And next up for the Huntington Foresters, they remain at home against Bethel on Saturday, and that could be a really, really good game. Then they're at Mount Vernon next Wednesday night. Then they're at Taylor next Saturday. And then Marion and IWU, both games will be at home, though, with 17th and 20th back-to-back. So that's a really tough schedule for the Foresters. And looking at other teams, Receiving Votes Grace, 7-6 now on the year. They lost to IWU last night, 3-0. And for Grace, they've had an up-and-down year. They've beaten some good teams. They played an extremely tough schedule, and of course for them, under head coach Katie Hill, they have, and some games they've struggled, other games they played really, really well, but then you get into conference play, and it's a whole other story altogether. And then, of course, Goshen 4-7, St. Francis 4-9, and then, of course, Mount Vernon 6-4, right now ranked 15th, depending on, now if Mount Vernon's able to beat Taylor on Saturday, it's ranked 22nd. I think that'll kind of wash out Mount Vernon's upset loss last night to Bethel, to where Mount Vernon, might fall 1 or 2 spots, depending on what happens in the next poll, which won't be out, I believe, for 2 more weeks. And then lastly, looking at Indiana Wesleyan, they are 5-3 now, and 1-0 in conference, but they had an extremely tough non-conference. Now, they did beat Receiving Votes Mid-America Nazarene out of Kansas 3-1, swept Columbia, Missouri 3-0, then number 4 Concordia, Nebraska, lost 3-2, beat Hastings 3-1, got swept by number 1 or 2 Bellevue. I don't remember where the top 5 teams are now. Bellevue, I think, is actually down to 4, because I think they lost to one team. I think one team after that, after they upset IWU. But IWU losing 3-0, and that's the first time in several years that Indiana Wesleyan has been swept by an opponent. And then they played number 16 Viterbo, lost 3-2. But the biggest thing for IWU, and I think what saved them from falling out of the top 10 in the national polls, was not really upsetting, but having a very good quality win against Northwestern out of Iowa, winning 3-1. And that was a game of a rematch of a 2023 national championship, when Northwestern was the one that beat IWU for the national title. And of course, IWU kind of, I guess you could say, avenged that loss last weekend. And then, of course, IWU sweeping Grace to start off conference play last night. And this is 43 straight games. Of course, you do the math, 18 games a season. So this is now 3 straight years in a row that the Lady Wildcats have won the first game of conference play under head coach Candace Moats, who's in her, I believe, 24th year at IWU. So obviously that's a huge achievement. And then for IWU, they've had a long road schedule. They're at Spring Arbor on Saturday. This could be a really, really good game. Then they're at St. Francis on next Wednesday night. And then at home against Bethel next Saturday, home against Mount Vernon the following Wednesday, and then the following Saturday at Huntington, and then home against Marion and Taylor to round out this month, meaning the first half of conference play. So obviously a lot can happen. So that is an update on volleyball. Now again, I don't plan on doing a lot of volleyball videos, at least not doing daily game recaps like I do for basketball, since I primarily focus on doing the daily game recaps on basketball only. So, and again, I'm still going to do all that, still going to do all the national tournament things that I did for this past season. I talked about that briefly at the beginning of this video. So obviously I'm still going to do all those things. So that's still going to be coming your way once we get into the heart of basketball season coming up here in just about 2.5 months. So I greatly appreciate that, and I greatly appreciate you tuning in to this video. And again, I'm so like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm still going to do all the basketball videos here on my YouTube channel, and I'm still going to do all the national tournament videos the same format as what I did last year. And I'm still going to utilize my Spotify for Creators podcast website to talk about at the very end of each basketball season, going over the statistical leaders in points per game, as well as rebounds and assists and all that good stuff. So make sure that, now again, that's probably about the only thing I'm going to utilize my Spotify podcast website for. And then maybe here, in a couple years, try to do some coach and player interviews, just depending on how that goes. I think, though, for the most part, I'm just going to utilize that for very end of the season, recapping all the statistics for points per game, like I mentioned, rebounds, assists, and that sort of thing. And I think that's the only, really, for the most part, what I'm primarily going to use that platform for. But you can still follow me on there. Just go to Spotify for Podcast Creator. Go to Spotify for Creators podcast website on Spotify. Search Matt's Sports Talk on there, and you'll find my account name. There's a picture of an orange basketball. That's me, so make sure that you follow me there as well. And then also make sure that you subscribe to me here on YouTube, as this is going to be my main platform for daily game recaps all throughout basketball season this year. I'm really, really excited about it. I had a lot of positive feedback last year when I started doing this in January and last season, and got a ton of positive feedback from several people saying, hey, we love these videos, please keep doing them, and I greatly appreciate that. And I also appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos, and so please make sure that you subscribe here to this channel. And you can find me here at Matt Harden 5749, I believe, is my YouTube username. So you can search for that in the search bar, and make sure that you subscribe here to this channel, because this is my primary account, or not account, but my primary method, so to speak, of all these videos. And make sure that you subscribe so you're first notified whenever I upload new episodes here to my YouTube channel. And lastly, if you did enjoy this video, or if you would like me to do more volleyball videos here throughout the rest of the volleyball season, please either leave me a comment down below, or like I said, subscribe to my channel, and any one of those options helps me out greatly. And again, I truly appreciate all the feedback and that you give me, and I truly also appreciate for taking the time to watch these videos. So thanks so much for watching this video. Have a great and blessed rest of your day, a blessed weekend, and God bless.